Welcome to the Heart Centered Life podcast, a podcast that helps you cultivate a life where intellect, emotion, and intuition align. Each week, we bring you tools, resources, or guests to help you find that space where your true happiness resides and encourage you to meet the world's deep hunger from that place. Because we truly believe that when your deep happiness meets the world's deep hunger, miracles happen. I'm your host, Elena Boyd. So welcome everyone to the Heart Centered Life podcast. And today we are excited to have Dan Zehner here with us. Dan works with two nationally funded institutes at Purdue University. The first is the Natural Hazards Engineering Research Infrastructure that is funded by the National Science Foundation. And the second is a really interesting project funded by NASA. It's a research center called the Resilient Extraterrestrial Habitat Institute, and we would love to hear more about that from Zen. But Zen's going to talk to us today about the value of adventure for the heart-centered life. So welcome, Zen. We are delighted to have you, and thank you for spending the time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Elena. And yeah, I work for a couple of mouthfuls, so well done on getting through the acronym soup there.
So tell us about this research center, the Resilient Extraterrestrial Habitat Institute.
Yeah, so thankfully it shortens down to a small acronym, RETH-I. It is all about pulling together civil engineers, environmental engineers, robotics engineers, planetary scientists at three different universities. We're headquartered here at Purdue, but all going towards the mission of a resilient infrastructure for human habitation of the moon and Mars. So we look at the resilience of the structures themselves to all the hazards that are present. We look at the health monitoring and sensing of the elements of those structures, how they sense their environment and their different impacts or disturbances from the environment, and then also how robots can work with the humans that are going to be living and working in these environments to help either restore capability after damaged states or prepare structures ahead of humans arriving to a site, or keeping things maintained during periods of dormancy.
Wow, that is amazing. So are you working with a lot of artificial intelligence and all that to collect and crunch the data?
Yeah, so we are doing that, but our big differentiator in this research institute is we do something called hybrid simulations. So we put part of a structure or an element of the structure into a physical testing scenario and have it feed back in real time to a numerical model in a supercomputer. So, and by real time, I mean on the same time scale as a response to a particular input. So if you're wanting to simulate, thermal expansion or something like that, you'd actually be applying a heat or cold to something in the lab, and then as that heats up or expands or whatever, the numerical model will respond in the same time scale. So you can do some really cool stuff without spending as much money as you would need to build a full habitat or simulated Mars or landscape or something like that.
Well, it's amazing what science lets us do these days. You get instantaneous feedback with that.
Yeah, and you get to test a lot of different things that you just wouldn't be able to a few years ago because of now this capability that we have in our team.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump right into adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what we're going to talk about today. But tell us a little bit about your background and why adventure is so important to you.
Yeah, so my background, as you can see, I spent pretty much my whole professional career as an engineer in a cubicle. in various
Yeah.
settings, from working on hydraulic systems for nuclear submarines to 3D printing at a shipyard to manufacturing engineering at Subaru, validation engineering at Caterpillar, now I'm at Purdue. But I spend, like most people, a lot of my day inside,
Yeah.
and at a desk, and we just aren't built for that. I read
Immobile as well.
yeah, right. So I discovered or rediscovered, just kind of a little bit about how I'm created and wired, and how we all are, for adventure as a big part of our lives through the work of an author named John Eldredge. And he wrote a book called Wild at Heart about how we're created for this adventure to live, a battle to fight, and a beauty to rescue as men. And I was like, whoa, yeah. And I've now read his book like 3 times and met him a couple of times, and am starting to build a friendship with his 2 older sons who are about my age, Sam and Blaine. And just finding the more I incorporate adventure into my life, the better life gets. And the more wholehearted I am, and the better my soul feels. Like this morning, perfect example of, we'll get into this a bit, about adventure also doesn't have to be big. Before I had a meeting with my insurance agent, I stopped at a park on the way and took a walk through the woods in the snow.
Oh my goodness.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
No big deal, but just took a short walk and took time to, appreciate the sound of the crunch of snow between my boots, and, I felt the bark on the trees a little bit, and listened to some birds, and, and it all sounds kind of crunchy granola, but it was really refreshing. And just like, especially these days, our souls kind of get this state where we're just burnt out, and we're like wrinkled up like little raisins. And if we get out into nature a little bit, we can kind of let things go, and things kind of expand a little bit, and then we're able to actually be filled like we're meant to be, as we do that.
Yeah, and we come back to the day with a fresh mind. Clear eyes. We breathe better.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Something that else I've been noticing too is like how often myself and others, we just unconsciously hold our breath throughout the day because we're just stressed, or we don't acknowledge the importance of pausing in our day. We just go, and we have one gear on,
right?
And being a mechanical engineer, I know that if you only have one gear, you ain't going anywhere very fast.
Yeah.
And also, if you try and, I'm going to switch analogies here. If your transmission has multiple gears, but you're trying to swap between them really quickly without proper transition time, using a clutch, you're going to grind your gears off, and burn yourself out. So,
So I like that. I like that you say you took a brief moment to go out, walk in the snow, feel the crunch of the snow and twigs on your feet, taking the fresh air before your day started. And I think a lot of us need to do that, just going out. So that's one idea of adventure. But how would you define adventure? Generally?
So how I define adventure is any experience where you learn by persevering into the unknown and finding fulfillment. And even just coming up with that distinction was an adventure in itself. I actually, a really good friend of mine, he's a retired Navy SEAL, and he helped me come up with that. He's really good at being precise with his language.
Yeah.
And so we came up with, just distilled from all the definitions we've ever heard and experiences we've had, and we've seen others have, or we want to have, like, these are the key elements of adventure. So you got to learn something. It's got to be an experience, which means it needs to have a little bit of risk. It's got to have an element of the unknown. You've got to persevere, and then it's got to be fulfilling at the end. And so it doesn't mean that it has to be big. It could be very small, like a walk in the woods in the cold.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as simple sounding as having a vulnerable conversation with your spouse.
Yeah.
And that's really risky.
It is.
But you can do it tonight.
It definitely is a trade into the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest event, this is kind of how I look at, kind of flipping adventure on its head. Like the biggest adventures, the most epic ones in the world, they're not climbing Mount Everest. They're not heli-skiing down K2. They're not, jumping off a mountain in a squirrel suit. Those are reckless and can be fun, but the truly epic adventures are where, you're using a lot of emotional capital. You're risking love itself.
Yeah.
Fatherhood, motherhood, marriage, relationships.
Yeah.
Those are the truly epic adventures. And you can do that every day of your life.
I love it. Building connections, finding the right people to work with, collaborate with.
Mm-hmm.
All that is an adventure. I love that definition. So the definition of adventure to you is to learn by experience, which would involve risk, and then persevering into the unknown, and then finding fulfillment.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you break it down when you?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
There's categories, kind of a spectrum.
Okay. Yeah.
From casual adventures to crucial to epic. So we talked about the epic a bit. So casual is a low risk adventure that doesn't require any planning necessarily. You can plan if you're an engineer like me. I plan just about everything, but you don't have to. And what I like about the casual adventures is it gives it dignity to things you can do every day, like that walk in the woods or going for a bike ride, get on your mountain bike, or something else I like to do a lot is go rucking. So put my rucksack on with a 30-pound steel plate in it and then go out for a walk, everyday stuff just brings some joy into your life. It's really fulfilling. Crucial adventures are where you've got a higher risk adventure that's catalyzed by self-reflection. So it connects you to the larger story of your life and the larger story of the world that we've been created into. So that could mean that you're in the midst of a casual adventure and something changes to be like, oh, this just got real, An example of that from me was I was doing an endurance event called the Go Ruck Challenge. It was about 3 a.m. We've been going since 9 o'clock at night, carrying heavy rucksacks around and doing lots of burpees and bear crawls and buddy carries and things. And we were in the midst of a whole lot of flutter kicks. So you're on your back and you're having to hold your 45-pound ruck over your head and move your legs up and down. I think we were having to do like 60 of them or something. And I was smoked, like just barely able to hold anything up, let alone do the exercise. And I think I don't know if I yelled it or just kind of croaked it out, but I said like, I can't do this. And a guy in front of me says, yes, you can. Don't you fucking quit on me. And at that moment, it became not so much, it was like, oh, this just got real. This got about like, do I have what it takes as a man to continue, or am I going to quit? And that is the core question for us as men in our lives. Do I have what it takes? And when that question comes in, that's when it becomes crucial. There's a different question for women generally of, am I delightful? Am I lovely? Am I worth fighting for? So when that question comes up in a moment, that's when it's become crucial. And then the epic that we talked about before, this is the highest risk adventures that involve a high amount of physical, emotional, or mental resources to complete. So those really crucial conversations, those deep relationships, could
like asking someone to marry you.
Yeah, absolutely. It could also mean, an expedition to Everest, sure, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've thought so much about adventure, and I like the way you've framed adventure to be not only, going out and doing things, but that the adventure with daily life and relationships and, making the right connections, making the right choices. That in itself is an adventure, and I love
Yeah.
how you framed it that way. I know you have a podcast, the Anthem of the Adventure, and I've listened to a few episodes, and I think you talk a lot about going out there and doing things. Tell us a bit more about that podcast and what inspired you to come up with that.
It's a really fun story how that got started. So
Yeah.
it was, gosh, a little over 2 years ago now, which is kind of crazy. I was, I'm in a mastermind group called the Dad Edge Alliance. It's all dads who are trying to become better men and husbands and fathers. And we had just read John Eldredge's book, Wild at Heart, and it really resonated with me. I was like, what do I do with this? I feel like God is calling me to something big, and it's around adventure and men, and I have no idea what to do with it. Thankfully, we ended up having a Q&A video call on Zoom with John Eldredge. And I got to ask him the question of like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I just got my soul hit like a gong and it's resonating with this. And I have no idea what to do with it. It just feels so big. I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, first of all, that's really great. I love what your mission you feel called to. And here's what you do. You need to just have a conversation with God about it. And here's how. Like, just need to listen, have a listening prayer posture, and listen for what's your next step, like literally the next place you're going to put your foot. You don't need to know the whole path. And who are your allies? And if you listen for those things and do those things, you never know where it's going to take you. So that's what I did. First off, I bought his book on how to do listening prayer. It's called Walking with God. It's great. I ended up reading it 4 times that year. Because I'd never I've always seen prayer as just like, hey, God, please help me. Or
Right.
I'm dealing with this thing with this person and I don't know what to do about it. But it was never like, okay, what do you want to tell me today? What do you want to teach me here? What's my next, like, I was always telling things instead of asking things. And so I listened. I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? And I sat with that for a while. And I heard, hey, you should start a podcast. I'm like, okay, I could do that. I've done it before. I did one for work on natural hazards research, and it's going well. I can start that. Okay, who do I invite? Got a list of 12 people. I invited them the next day. They all said yes. I'm like, well, I guess I've got a podcast about adventure now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so it has morphed from a weekly show to now I just do seasons to frankly just be kind to myself. Because I do all the recording and booking and editing everything myself most of the time. And what the show focuses on is my big intent with it is to inspire people to a life and that embraces adventure as something necessary and attainable. And so we give really doable challenges every episode. Some of them are hard by design. I mean, one of them is literally train up and accomplish the Special Forces standard for the 12-mile ruck, which is 30 pounds on your back to go 12 miles in under 3 hours. It is not easy.
Goodness, wow.
But it is extremely attainable for most people, unless you have some, physical limitations, and I get that. But for the great majority of us, with a couple months of training, you can do it. And it's really amazing when you do. I finally did it myself out in San Francisco a couple months ago. And it was awesome. I got done with it. I went over the Golden Gate Bridge. I went along the beach. I went up into the highlands into Marin County. And it was wonderful. And I ended up finishing exactly at a Starbucks by the grace of God alone. I collapsed in a heap in this juice bar next to the Starbucks. And I was like, you have no idea what I just did. It was amazing. Get me something tasty that's got a lot of protein in it. And they're like, you just did what? I'm like, yeah, it was awesome. So these, the challenges range from that level of crazy to, for 30 days, don't look at your phone for the, first hour of the morning.
Yeah.
Like
that's a hard challenge.
it's a hard challenge, but everybody can and should do it.
Yeah.
Or, read 10 pages of a book every day for 30 days. So there's a variety of challenges that are very doable that everybody who has taken them on has always been like, wow, that was really great.
I love
When's the
it.
next one?
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. It's been a learning experience for myself, first and foremost, of like how to go from just suffering in a cubicle to, okay, I'm doing work well, I'm doing life well, I'm taking care of myself well, so that I can take care of my family and the people that I'm called to serve well. By embracing adventure in all of its forms, from the casual to the crucial to the epic.
Have you found that creating that podcast has changed your life in the sense that it's made it different?
Oh yeah, I mean,
open up
case
doors.
in point.
Yeah.
I've made a lot of friendships through it.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the guys texted me right before we got on here that I've become really good friends with, Jeff Benaldi, and some of the conversations I get to have through Jeff are great. Like, he's introduced me to a lot of really fun people. And this past week, he's like, hey, I've got a buddy out in Tanzania. He's a pilot, and he takes people on scenic flights around Mount Kilimanjaro. And he's wanting to ask you about audio recording technology for making audio tours. I'm like, what? This is my life now?
Yeah.
Of course. Or I get to say this. He's like one of my best friends in the world now. He's a retired Navy SEAL, Larry Yatch. Next weekend, we're going ice racing in Minnesota, and we're going to drive sports cars on a frozen lake. It's just like, this is life now, and it's great.
And you would have never met these people without the podcast?
I wouldn't have met Jeff. I already knew Larry, but I wouldn't have been able to do this adventure stuff with him because I just wouldn't have had a category for it.
Yeah.
We had been doing some leadership training together, and then I got into this adventure thing. I'm like, hey, what if we could make this part of your business, and I can help you with that? He's like, well, yeah, I want more adventure in my life. That's like my big thing. I'm like, okay, how can we do that? And now we're doing it together, and it's great.
You've talked about how you created your podcast. You were talking to John Eldridge.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, have a conversation with God, and you did, and you came up with this idea to have a podcast. I know many of our listeners listening in are people who are creative, but who are scared to create.
Yeah.
Or they know that they want to do something, but they don't know how to. What would you say to them?
First thing is, be kind to yourself and let yourself be okay with sucking at something for a while. Like, we're all terrible at things when we first started. Like I've got 3 kids, and one of them is 16 months old now. She's just learning how to walk up the stairs, and she sucks at it. But she's 16 months old. She's supposed to. Like, every time we start something new, we're terrible at it. It's just a fact of life, and that's okay. Let it be okay to suck at something for a while. Create an environment where that is totally fine. Second thing is actually create space for failing a bunch, for learning how to do the thing that you want to do. Maybe it's you want to learn how to draw landscapes. This is something I'm learning how to do right now. So a couple times a month, sometimes even once a week, after the kids go to bed, before my wife comes down, I'll set up my drawing pad out and my markers and just draw. And I'm totally fine with it looking like a pile of turds, but it's just restorative to try. Yeah. And the more I do it, the better I get. The better I get, the more I want to do it. And it's just that cycle, but it all starts with being okay with being terrible at it.
I love it. So, so one step at a time. It's okay to suck for a while.
Yeah, and don't try and paint, paint the Sistine Chapel at the beginning, as you're just going to discourage yourself. I did when I got into woodworking. I tried to design this beautiful green and green side cabinet thing, and it took me 4 years to finish it because I started off with the equivalent of the Sistine Chapel. Like, if I had done something like, okay, let's just make some cutting boards for a little while and let that be okay. And let it be okay that they might end up being firewood, you know? And so I ended up kind of going back and like, all right, we're going to put this thing on the shelf for a little bit. I'm just going to build a couple cutting boards and oh, okay, this is cool. So find something low risk, like casual adventure to get started, to build the skills, to take on the big thing that you ultimately want to do. This is actually something I'm developing into a journaling system along with my buddy Larry. I mean, this is how the Navy SEALs plan their missions, right? So they look at an environment they want to create. And they talk about the emotions that they want to feel when they're done with something. And then they plan from there. So think about if you want to be more creative in some sort of physical media, say, okay, I want to just have the skill of painting in my life. And if I do that really well, it's going to feel, I'm going to feel creative. I'm going to feel like I can express myself. And that's going to lead to me having a lot of paintings that I've made around my house. And every time that somebody comes into my house, I'm going to be able to point to this beautiful thing I created. And then plan from there. Like, okay, what skills am I going to need to develop to make that happen? I'm going to need to probably learn a bit about color theory. I'm going to need to know about different mediums and brushes. And okay, how can I do that in a low risk way? Think of some casual adventures that it's going to be okay to fail. Maybe I just go take an art class or 3 or 10 around town. Or I find a friend on Facebook who could teach me something over Zoom, or I go play with the stuff that I've got sitting in my closet that I've had for 10 years. Whatever it is. And you just identify those skills that you want to become confident in. You create an environment where it's okay to fail with no consequence to yourself. And then eventually you introduce some risk to that practice to gain experience. Say, okay, I'm going to do this big painting for my wife. I'm going to give it to her for Valentine's Day. This is something I'm doing right now. Actually, tonight I'm finishing it up. Tracy's not going to listen to this before tomorrow. So I'm making a drawing using the artist markers I've learned how to use of one of our favorite places in British Columbia that we haven't been to in a few years. And I'm making it big enough that she can frame it, and I'm going to put some reminders for her to take care of her soul throughout the day over the picture, and give it to her for Valentine's Day. Kind of risky, but that's going to help me get some experience in art, and then I can be confident that I can do it.
Yeah. You know, well, the Valentine's Day present sounds amazing. I'm sure she will love it. And yeah, she's not going to hear this before tomorrow. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that. But I did want to say that I noticed that, throughout everything that you said in the last half an hour or so, you sound like you have an abandoned mindset. It's okay to fail. It's okay if things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
You don't need to aim for perfection. It sounds as if you are really comfortable with the process, and making progress instead of trying to get.
Yeah.
How do you cultivate that mindset?
One of the biggest things is hang around other people who have that mindset.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the quote is from a lot of people, but you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So I spend time with Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and scientists, people who are okay with failing a lot, and have a growth mindset. I also spend time with people who challenge me spiritually and emotionally, and also encourage me to take care of myself, and that helps a lot. But the other thing is like, just knowing that this is a way of being that is opposed by the world. The world at large doesn't do things like this, and so it's going to be hard, and that's okay. And so it's going to take some stumbling. It's going to take some. All right, I need to put this on my calendar. this is a silly thing to put on the calendar of, okay, you need to go for a walk in the woods. But it might come to that of a friend of mine, Alistair Humphreys, is a great author about adventure in all of its forms. He celebrates them. He calls it the micro adventure, what I call casual adventures. But he literally has an appointment on his calendar the first Tuesday of every month to climb a tree.
Wow.
And it seems silly, but it's so restorative. And, that's what it takes sometimes, is to just put a stake in the ground and be like, this is the kind of person I want to be. I want to be the kind of person who climbs a tree the first Tuesday of every month. And so I'm going to make an appointment on my calendar with a tree.
I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is that we actually need to schedule important events into our already busy schedule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like we can't, and most of our listeners are professionals, entrepreneurs, lawyers, doctors, and we have full schedules.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so important, like you say, to schedule time to climb a tree, or because you want to make sure that time is unadulterated, it's protected, it's safe, it's sacred, right?
Yeah.
And
and keep it like any other appointment with the client on your calendar.
Right. And even sleep,
Yeah, sleep is huge.
Right. And I think a lot of people listening in tend to work really late, and think that they can catch up on sleep.
Yeah. So I want to circle in and focus in on that, especially for your listeners who are these amazing professionals who serve others, who entangle themselves with others' lives all throughout the day, and you come home wondering why you're feeling exhausted. It's because you're basically like Velcro, and you've let things attach itself to you all day, and you never take time to rip that stuff off.
Yeah.
And so some of the most effective people in the world in the most dangerous environments, guys in the special forces, my friends in the Navy SEALs and Rangers, they have found this to be true, that to be the most effective that you can, you need to operate at 80% capacity, not 110. If you're trying to operate at 100% capacity or over, you're going to fail yourself. You're going to fail others. You're going to hurt things. You're going to break things. You're going to get hurt. And in their world, it gets people killed. And for us as professionals who aren't in the physical life and death every day, it can seem like, oh, it's no big deal if I work late every night. Where in actuality, we're in spiritual life and death every day.
I love that. Yeah.
And so if we don't intentionally, plan our schedules, plan our times, plan the way of being to operate at 80% capacity, we're going to break things. We're going to get people killed. We're going to get ourselves killed spiritually.
Yeah, we lose the case. We file the motion late.
Yeah.
We are disorganized before the judge. I love
exactly.
it. Dan, that is amazing advice. And I like the way you've explained it with the people who work with physical in physical jobs, like the Navy SEALs and all that, and making an analogy to the professions. I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, it's hard because it's not right in front of your face, but you feel it in your soul. And there's a really good book that I'm reading. Actually, I got it right next to my desk today. Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge. Who else? But he talks about just this simple practice that can help with this. That's so huge, of just taking a minute to pause a couple times a day. Like when you get off the phone with that client that was really tough, and you got a meeting coming up, take a minute, just take a breath, give that client over to God, give that meeting over to God, give that whatever's coming up to you, give it up and really let it go. You might have to stay with it until you actually feel, okay, I'm not planning about it anymore. It's actually gone. It might take a little bit, but really letting things go, taking the those Velcro little burrs. You know how you go out in the woods sometimes, and you like come back. What are these things stuck to me? Or like if you walk your dog out in the briar patch and you spend like an hour taking those things. That's what happens to us all the time throughout the day. We're scrolling through Facebook and go, oh, man, there's another earthquake, another bombing, another fire. Oh, somebody just died. That stuff attaches itself to ourselves, and we were never meant to carry it. We're not God. We are human. We're meant to carry very few things in life. We're meant to live freely and lightly.
I love that. Yeah. And it's so true. You know, we see people rushing from one thing to another, from this client to the next, and then we have to appear before the judge, or, you know, one patient to another, or, you know, one funders meeting to another. I love what you just said, you know, because if not, we are collecting, you know, spiritual and emotional baggage, as you say.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean about the rye patch and all that, because my daughter comes back with mulch stuff clothes every day. Yeah, and I clean it, right? Because it's all there. Yeah, but if I didn't wash the clothes and I left the mulch there, she'll be mulched out.
Yeah, and she'll be uncomfortable, and she'll be 3 a.m. Mommy, I'm uncomfortable. There's something in my jammies. Yeah, it's terrible. And you know, so for those of you who are like, well, okay, all this heart stuff is just like, it's great for you, but it's, you know, I'm not going to be able to do that. I got a busy life. There's a really great, and I'm getting into faith things here, but there's some really great truths from the scripture, no matter what your faith background, of it's the golden rule: treat others as you would treat yourself. And there's a big truth in there that a lot of us miss, is that if we treated others, or if we treated our neighbors the way we treat our own hearts, we'd be pretty shitty neighbors.
Right.
You know, if we treated our wives and our children and our coworkers the way we treated our own hearts, we would be terrible husbands and fathers and mothers and coworkers. So we need to actually treat our hearts well so that we can treat others well.
Dan, that is so good. Thank you. Yeah, I've never looked at it that way. Yeah, everyone knows that golden rule, but no one has said it quite the way you did. Oh, I haven't heard it said the way you said it. So that's really good.
It's been something I've been learning a lot through my buddy John and some other dear friends. Like, oh man, you know, I can't show up the best I want to for the people I care about most unless I'm taking care of myself well, because how I treat myself, whether I'm aware of it or not, is how I'm going to treat others. Like with my kids, I've got 3 kids. They're 6, 3, and 1. My 3-year-old has a wonderful way of getting under my skin. And she's got these big emotions she doesn't know how to deal with. And my whole life, I've basically, you know, shut my emotions down and been like, I can't deal with that right now. I don't have time. We got to get to this next thing. And so last night, after reading this in John's book, of like, you need to actually process these emotions yourself so that you can do that with your kids. Like, okay, next time this comes up with Jane, we're going to take as long as it takes, and we're going to process it. So got a perfect opportunity after taking the kids out sledding. They went to build a snowman with our neighbors, and she comes in crying like, Daddy, I didn't get to finish my snowman because I was too cold. Because she had lost her gloves and her hat and she was all wet and cold. I'm like, how does that make you feel? Sad. Like, it's okay to feel sad. I feel sad too. Would you like to go snuggle on the couch and warm up? Yes, Daddy. Okay. And I didn't just brush it off. I'm like, we went and sat, and we let one of our cats cuddle up on our lap for a little bit. And we just sat there watching TV for a little while. And a few minutes later, I checked in like, how are you feeling, Jane? I'm still sad because you didn't get to finish your snowman. I really wanted to finish my snowman. I know. It must make you feel really sad. And that's okay. I still love you, even when you're sad. And you can come to me anytime you feel sad, and we will take and snuggle as long as you want. Mm-hmm. And we kind of went back and forth like that for an hour. And it was wonderful. And I really don't do that often enough.
Yeah. I think we owe it to our kids to make sure that they know it's okay to feel whatever they feel.
Yeah. And for us too. And so, as much as we want to do that for our kids, we need to, when our boss comes in the door after a meeting and says, "You really screwed it up today, Dan. What are you doing?" And you feel that, 5-year-old boy come up of like, "Oh shit, I did it again." You know, you got to give yourself some grace there and be like, "All right, we're going to sit in this as long as it takes to process this and be okay. I'm not going to go, just grab a cup of coffee and a chocolate bar. I'm going to journal for a bit. I'm going to throw on some worship music and pray. And I might cancel that afternoon meeting that I really don't need to go to so that I can take care of my heart for a bit. And so that I can come to my boss later and be like, yeah, I did screw that up. I'm human. How can I help? How can I make it better? What can I do better next time?" So that I can heal and I can work on the relationship and I can work on, the work. But I don't just go banging right back into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. We've talked so much about taking care of ourselves, and I know adventure to you is a large part of that self-care.
Yeah.
And I think you've touched on it in bits and pieces throughout the conversation. That conversation that you had with your 3-year-old daughter, about not finishing her snowman. I mean, that's an adventure in itself. It's
Absolutely. That's an epic adventure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But could you talk more generally about how to incorporate adventure as a family
Mm,
activity?
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So the biggest thing, so I'll speak to the men in the audience first.
Hmm.
So for us, if you're a husband, if you're a dad, you have the role of the manager of your household, not the leader. You're the one who creates an environment for your family to develop. You enable your family, you support them, and you set very clear desired end state for your family that then your wife gets to come into, that you get to agree on, but you put it out there first. And then you help the family then take action on that. And so for me, I set a desired end state with Tracy, but I help kind of put it out there first, and then we crafted it together. One of the things that we value is adventure as a family. And so I put out times in the week like, okay, Saturday morning, I'm going to go to Taekwondo practice with my son. Every Saturday, we go and kick things for 2 hours. And I will probably end up on the floor with a bruised elbow. But that's how we do it. Or Wednesday nights, we go out for a hike when it's warm enough out, to our friends who are managers of a Boy Scout camp, and we bring others with us. And it's on the calendar. It's on the schedule. We've got all the resources in place to do it. I keep my car stocked with camping gear so that if we want to just get out for a night, it takes 10 minutes to pack. So I keep the environment and my skills and my schedule ready to adventure anytime we want to.
That's nice. Again, it sounds as if you have it planned into your schedule. You adventure is something that you, or anything that matters to anyone, right? It's as if you've written it into your daily weekly schedule.
Yeah, one of my friends, Navy SEAL, no surprise there. His name's Eric Davis. He used to be a sniper, and actually was the head of the sniper school for the Navy SEALs. He taught guys like Chris Kyle and Marcus Luttrell,
Hmm.
guys like that. One of the things he said that I really like is, we are what we're prepared to do. So if you want to be an adventurous person, you need to be prepared to be
Hmm.
at all times. The skills, the time in your schedule, the resources, the materials, the gear. Of course, the gear. We love gear. You know,
Hmm.
I started carrying around hammocks in my car so that when it's a nice day and I've got even just some emails to read,
Yeah.
like I'll go. Granted, I'm on a college campus where we've got trees and Wi-Fi combined, which is nice. So,
Hmm.
if it's a nice afternoon out and I got to bang out some emails, I'll take my laptop and a hammock, hang it up in a park somewhere,
Yeah.
and I'll do email in a hammock. It's adventure.
Yeah.
And I'm getting work done. That's great.
Yeah.
Or I keep my steel plate in my ruck so that if somebody wants to go for a workout while we're walking and talking about, something we got to meet about, I'm doing adventure
Mm-hmm.
in my daily. And so it's preparing your environment, your schedule, your gear, and your family's mindset. But now my family knows I'm crazy, but they're crazy with me.
That's nice. So you've given advice for incorporating adventure into the family life from the men's perspective. What would you say to women listening in?
Yeah. Give your husband permission and encourage him, because he's probably scared of what you're going to think. Not probably, he is.
Yeah.
Every time I ask, can I go out to the woods for 4 days with my buddies and keep my cell phone off? That could be cool. I get a little puckered. Like, even though Tracy's wonderful about it and she always says yes, and how can I support? I always am like, I feel like I'm imposing upon her, because I am. She's going to have to deal with 3 kids by herself for 4 days, or I'm going to have to work on getting some babysitters to help out, things like that. But encourage him. Say, I don't know how we're going to do this. We'll figure that part out, but you need to go on a mountain bike ride with your buddies for 4 days, as far away as you can possibly get. What do we need to do to make that happen? Or go along with him. Be like, you know what I would really love to do? The last time I hear you talk about going fly fishing. Can we go together sometime? He would love that. Like, really? You want to go? Yes. Okay, let's go. When can we go? So if you want to go on something with him that will help both of your hearts feel joy, do that. Or if you see that he's just fried and needs to get out, he hasn't seen his buddies in 3 years or 10 or 20, put it on his calendar. You're like, you are going, no questions. You are taking a week in March and you are going to Arizona. I've already called your friends. You can't back out of this. Kick him out of the house if necessary.
Dan, that's such great advice. I mean, that is amazing advice, because my next question, I think you've answered it, is what if you are on different pages, with respect to adventure? And I think you've explained that.
Yeah. So I'll just unpack a little more about just kind of my own experience. So Tracy is not a adrenaline junkie by any stretch. She loves adventure in different ways. She loves cooking at different dishes together. She loves exploring new cities or environments together at a leisurely pace, which is great. I love that about her. But when we get an opportunity to go to, say, Normandy, France, like we did last June, we designed that trip with some adventures we could do together, some adventures we did separately. And it was great. I'd never thought about it before of vacationing together. It wasn't really a vacation anymore because we brought our youngest child along. She was 8 months old at the time. So it became an adventure. We framed it as that. It's not a vacation. It's probably not going to be relaxing the whole time. That was the first thing. But also, there's some things that I wanted to do, like a Go Ruck challenge on Omaha Beach at 5 a.m, that I knew she would never want to do. And we made it okay for me to go do that and her to do some things that filled her up for the day. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the time, we did things like just bumming around the countryside and finding some, delicious cheese to eat, or trying some cider from the farm next to the Airbnb that we tried. And so, finding things that you can do that you can adventure together in ways that fill you both up, but also letting it be totally okay to adventure separately in the ways that don't fill each other up. And it's celebrating your own individual ways of finding adventure in your life.
My goodness, Dan, I love it. I love everything you've just said. I've loved this conversation with you. And I could talk to you all day. I would love to.
That would be great sometime.
But we're going to have to wrap this up. And I wanted to ask you, you've given us so much to think about and to work with. Is there anything you would want to say to the audience before we end this conversation?
Yeah, I'll end with some really good advice from my friend Alistair Humphreys. Just get out the door. That first step is the hardest one. That doorstep mile that the Nordic people talk about, that's the hardest. So just get started. Something that's going to bring some joy to your life, whether it's learning to mountain bike or play the piano or cook Filipino food or just have a difficult conversation with your teenage daughter. Just start.
Take the very first step. So Dan, if we want to find you, you're going to quickly tell us where to find you, and I'll have the links in the show notes below. But just for the audience, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me these days mostly on Instagram at Anthem of the Adventurer. Same thing on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
You can also find the work that I do with SEAL Team Leaders, Larry Yatch's company, on both of those places as well. You could shoot me an email, dan@sealteamleaders.com. Or if you're a scientist and want to do stuff with resilient extraterrestrial habitats, I can't even say it. You can find out what we're doing there at purdue.edu/rethi, RETHI. So that's the best places to find me.
Okay. And all of this will be in the show notes
Yes.
that accompany the podcast. Dan, I want to say thank you for spending this time with us. We love having you. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this week on the Heart-Centered Life podcast. Make sure to visit our website, www.elinaboyd.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. If you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. Be sure to check out some of our programs on how to cultivate, create, communicate, and inspire others from a heart-centered space. Tune in next week for our next episode, where we will help you find a place of deep happiness so that you can meet the world's deep hunger and watch miracles unfold.